Welcome back to another episode of Gigi Says What Now? I'm your host, Genevieve Gravel, but my friends call me Gigi. Hope you'll consider being my friend. Today we are continuing on with following the money. We do seem to be getting a little further away from Jeffrey Epstein, which is great, but we are still deep, deep, deep into the predatory class. The name of the article on my Substack that I am reading today is Kay Feeds and FYPs. If poor people knew how rich people are, there would be riots in the streets. Chris Rock. So I began this series with a desire for a call to justice from the DOJ in regards to the Epstein files, right? This desire kind of it coincided with just a strong need to be a part of a movement, a part of a society, a part of a community that wants to create, lasting change within our social consciousness and bring about an end to rape culture once and for all. Um, and I search for further understanding of, particularly within the predatory class, within the uber wealthy and the elite and the people who support this or deny it or cover it up, or it's not a red line for them, like the things we see in the Epstein files. But I also understand that I need to understand who they are and what their culture is like in order to know what I'm fighting against, if that makes sense. And I feel like the files kind of create a little glimpse, a little peek in through the curtains into the halls of power. And honestly, when I started this, uh, 6, 7, 8 months ago, when I really started looking into the Epstein files, um, I never expected myself. I never expected to find myself in the throes of conspiracy theories. Here we are, and I want to state for the record that I listen to conspiracy theories. I don't necessarily take stock in them, if that makes sense. But some of them do seem to be seated in a little bit of truth, um, and others just seem to be so far fetched. I tend to be of the mindset that the larger the conspiracy theory, the less likely it is to be true. Three can keep a secret if two of them are dead. Benjamin Franklin. In January of 1973, Richard Helms, the director of the CIA under POTUS Richard Nixon, ordered the destruction of all files pertaining to a drug research and associated activities. The CIA Records Center shredded and burned at least 152 records dating from 1952 through 1967. In 1977, while responding to a FOIA request. Now, FOIA that had been enacted in 1966 under POTUS Lyndon B. Johnson, right? And that's the Freedom of Information Act. So, under a FOIA request, a clerk discovered 7 boxes of files that had survived that purge in 1973. In December of 1977, the content found in those files would be brought to light in a New York Times article by Seymour Hersh. The chronicle told of how the CIA had funded and conducted covert studies involving up to 68 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. The studies involved conducting extreme and unethical experiments that can be described only as torture on human test subjects, many of them without test subjects' consent. And their mission was to find a way to control a person's behaviors and actions, or mind control, under a project named MKUltra. So some of the tactics used in MKUltra were deployed in the Vietnam War under the 1967 Project Phoenix, or the Phoenix Project. And we discussed that, and the government would not do that article. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories in the Ethernet that suggest or outright state that MKUltra was like the catalyst for the golden age of serial killers, an era spanning just over a decade from the late 60s through the early 80s, when the total number of active serial killers had spiked 1,300% more than typical. To give you an idea, that's like 1,000 in that decade compared to 50 that the United States would normally see in any given decade. It's quite a spike, and it's nobody knows why. Why were there so many serial killers in this? Now I have wondered if somebody that we brought up in the government would not do that. Philip Arthur Thompson, if he was the subject of MKUltra. It doesn't mean I believe in this conspiracy theory or really buy into it, but the question did cross my mind because it was said, and his lore is that he was a part of the Phoenix program, right? Now I'm doing a deep dive into this guy because I just can't figure out why there's so much lore and so much conspiracy theories around him and why he got away with so much. And I've done the research on the first 3 episodes of what might be as many as 8. So keep a lookout for that series on YouTube. I'll probably name it A Timeline of Crime. But just keep an eye out for that, okay? I'm just saying. But I do feel like the conspiracy theory surrounding MK Ultra being a catalyst for the golden age of serial killers, I feel like it brings up a lot more questions than it does answers. And yeah, the CIA has given us quite a bit, but certainly nowhere near the totality of what was going on back then. So those questions may never be answered, but I do feel like with so many people involved, I have a hard time swallowing that one. I just kind of it. I actually roll my eyes when people say that like Manson was probably an MK Ultra test subject, um, with no reason and no proof. It's just my gut instinct says, I don't think so. Again, hit that subscribe button. You're gonna want to be around for my Philip Arthur Thompson. I call him Pat or Piece of um, we'll go into it further then. Anyway, let's. I digress. I do that a lot, don't I? Okay, so let's back to the top. What a lot of professional scientists, people, psychologists, people that study have spent a long time studying um, the golden age of serial killers phenomenon. Some of them say it's part in fact to that these deranged criminals were exposed to lead pretty much. I mean, through paint and stuff like that, but mostly petrol when their brains were at a developing age. Some say that it was because they were raised by soldiers who had come home from World War II and were not treated for their PTSD. I don't know if I actually buy into that one either. Lots of people have experienced traumatic upbringings. I mean, even today, a lot of people experience trauma in their young lives and they don't grow up with an overwhelming urge to prey on and do these horrific acts against humanity, right? Um, so don't, and that kind of lends credence to the MK Ultra conspiracy theory. I don't buy into it though. I don't think that them being raised by soldiers is is really necessarily why there were so many in the 1970s. Um anyway, but I mean honestly, what do I know? I am not a psychologist, nor do I play one on TV. Now, there have been studies that have connected traumatic brain injuries to this type of behavior. I mean, there's been even elite athletes with beautiful homes and families at the top of their game who have done some horrific things, even towards those that they profess to love after sustaining head injuries. And as any true crime girly knows, serial killers are most often told of sustaining head injuries as a child, and that kind of gives a little more credence to the MKUltra theory. Um, I mean, honestly, being dosed with 16 hits of LSD led down a bad trip in an institution while someone is trying to convince you to murder somebody. Yeah, if nothing else, it definitely counts as trauma. That's a traumatic experience. I'm sorry. That's insane. To do that to somebody, and yeah, I have no doubt that their brain would forever be altered from an experience like. But there are certain things that we do have proof of, and what there's proof of is that MKUltra existed. In June of 2026, the House Oversight Committee Task Force held a hearing titled Mind Control Accountability. They examined the tactics, both verified and unverified, including the microwave auditory effect developed in World War II and published in a scientific journal in 1961 titled Microwave Auditory Effects and Applications. This was published by Pergamon Press, which was a Robert Maxwell company. This explored the effects of directing microwaves to the head. Now, studies have found that this application has some prolonged symptoms that mirror Havana syndrome, which was discovered just a decade ago in 2016. Many experts studying Havana syndrome say that the cause of these symptoms are a result of environmental factors and pre existing conditions, stuff like that. Now, those who have suffered from Havana syndrome, they have a much different perspective. There was a Norwegian scientist exploring Havana syndrome. He accidentally infected himself during a testing of a microwave device that he had built, and his symptoms included extreme and long lasting headache, vertigo, hearing loss. And this kind of further the discussion if this type of device actually exists in practicality today. The US government, they say no. No, no, no. In 2021, though, under the Havana Act, the U.S. government paid out $3 million in compensations to victims made up of personnel, military personnel, spies, diplomats, and their families. Some reports link the usage of sonic weaponry to Russian intelligence and to what U.S. officials have responded. They responded on X, by the way, because I guess that's how our government communicates with us now, is through social media. They said, it feels like a lot of journalists have lost their minds. This was after CNN claimed that the Pentagon was testing a device purchased in an undercover operation, and it may be the prototype of sonic weaponry that causes Havana syndrome. The findings of the 1977 hearings in room 1202 of Dickerson's Senate office, co-chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy, under the Carter administration, decided that the MKUltra program was an utter failure and we do not possess the abilities to control one's mind. Sure we do. Sure we do. With the power of influence and the control of information that sits in the palm of our hands every day. In 1951, Pergamon Press published scientific journals that had been suppressed in World War II, making them publicly available. Robert Maxwell had served in World War II and was subjected and committed heinous war crimes, some against children. During this time, the Nazi Party had a deep interest in science and technology. Their studies and findings had been kept secret and sanctioned, leaving scientists around the globe, with a desire to read these papers. They wanted to research this information. So when Robert Maxwell, when he began to publish them, he was the only one. And the researchers in the universities that were so desperate to get their hands on this information, they had no choice but to pay top dollar for them. And this was just the beginning of Robert Maxwell's empire. He would go on to start Maxwell Communication Corporation's group, Maxwell Communications Corporation, with the Mirror Group, the Daily Mirror, and Macmillan McGraw Hill. With that, he controlled most all of the textbooks, K through postgrad. It's safe to say he held influence and controlled the flow of information to our students beginning at a very young age. This is how history gets whitewashed. They say the victor go the spoils, but sometimes the spoils is controlling the narrative. So with the Daily Mirror, he held the ear through the tabloid headlines that influenced fads and daily topics of conversation. You know, I once caught a fish this big. In 1987, Ronald Reagan did away with the Fairness Doctrine, an FCC policy implemented in 1949 that required licensed television and radio broadcasters to present controversial issues in a balanced and fair manner in a reasonable amount of time, providing opposing viewpoints. It required broadcast frequencies to hold the public's trust and to avoid propaganda. The FCC abolished it, stating that it violated the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And with the introduction of the internet, cable, and satellite TV, it wouldn't have really applied anyhow because those don't use public airwaves. So while the Fairness Doctrine didn't have any direct regulation over print news, it did hold a lot of influence over journalism as a whole, right? It was taught to be fair and unbiased in reporting and journalism, covering all angles and exploring in depth. It kind of became a part of the landscape and public expectation. Not that journalism hadn't learned many years, if not decades before, that salacious or shocking headlines grabbed readers, a tactic we still use today with clickbait or ragebait. In the 1970s, the story beneath the headline, well, it would be a little bit more than a doctored photograph under the tabloid headline 90-year-old grandma gives birth to that boy. By the 1990s, US culture had been overrun with tabloid news, having people around the country believing that alien abductions were a credible threat, yet still not caring that Donald Trump had raped his wife, while not managing to keep Marla Maples' name out of their mouth for more than 5 minutes. Honestly, it wasn't that we didn't care. The discussion around the water cooler and in coffee houses surrounded more of how Ivana Trump said of the rape allegation that she didn't think it was criminal because she was his wife and she had taken vows to obey him, and therefore it couldn't be considered rape, no matter how brutal it was or how much hair she lost. In 1993, just after Donald Trump's 3-year divorce was a trending topic, the law based on the marital exemptions from Sir Matthew Hale's writings in 1736 was finally outlawed in all 50 states. Now, I remember having this conversation with my mom, and she agreed with Ivana. She was like, no, women take a vow to men. Therefore, they could do whatever they want. I did not agree. Not at all. And eventually the topic focused not on assault or the letter of the law, but on marriage vows. And it started to trend to take out the word obey. I mean, not without some backlash, but women started saying, I'm not saying obey. And it went from there till eventually it became popular to just write your own vows. Now, my vows had something to do with bubbles. But that is a fad from the 90s that has become a tradition that remains commonplace today. In 1999, Robert Maxwell bought the European before moving on to the NY Daily News, a popular tabloid since 1919. Robert Maxwell had 7 children, Michael and Karine. They died at young ages. Philip and Anne, who maintained private lives. Ian and Kevin, who were deeply embedded with Robert Maxwell's empire that would be they would be tried and acquitted of fraud. I mean, if you want to dive into the boys' fraud and the theft of employee pensions and stuff like that, you can let me know in the comments. I'll do a deep dive for you. And then there was Ghislaine, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's partner, and Christine and Isabel, who were involved with software development. In 1995, the sisters Isabella and Christine launched Magellan under the McKinsey Group. Magellan was one of the internet's first search engines. They were celebrated for their green light rating system that screamed for family-friendly content to keep kids safe on the internet. Magellan was acquired by Excite in 1996 for 18 million. Did I say I said 1996, right? It was 1996. Anyway, in 1996, Excite would also go public. They would acquire Ask Jeeves. You're my age, you remember. They would acquire AOL, Ticketmaster, and Intuit. In 1999, Excite would turn down an offer to acquire Google for $1 million, or what would become Google. Uh, at that time, Yahoo and Microsoft were interested in George Bell's Excite. They didn't get it though. George Bell had previously written a documentary for ABC and the BBC and Discovery, earning him 4 National Emmy Awards. In 1996, Christine Maxwell and Alan C. Wade developed Gilead Advanced Software in Amherst, MA. Gilead Publishing was a DC-based data mining and software company that developed global knowledge fusion. Not unlike IMSLA, it sought to cross-reference and merge data from separate spaces. The Gilead search and monitoring platforms would be used to power the FBI's counterterrorism warehouse after 9/11, handling over 659 million documents and cross-referencing information between the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, peaking at 1 million monthly inquiries. Key investigators, key investors into Gilead included Hewlett Packard, Chariot Capital, Allied Commercial Exports, and they received awards including $3.1 million from Phase 2 Small Business Innovation Research, raising in total over $3.2 million. Now, Gilead is closed today, replaced with alternatives like Apache, uh, Lucene. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. And Soul, and more current case management tools like Centel System. In 2019, Christine was appointed as Director of Environment for Change Foundation that focuses on engineering, machine learning, and AI. Before Magellan, Isabella Maxwell was a British and US TV producer and documentaries in the late 1980s, producing things like The Love That Dare Not Speak Its Name, exploring lesbian culture, among other documentaries as well. She served as the founder and the director of BAPTA LA and acted as senior advisor for Gramen, Grameen America, which was a microloan organizer. Isabel Maxwell joined Israel's ComTouch in 1999. Bill Gates invested $20 million in ComTouch, and their stocks skyrocketed from $11.63 per share to $49.13 per share in just a few hours. Today, Christine serves as president of ComTouch and has roles at the Press Center for Peace and Innovation and the Israel Venture Network, which is a nonprofit that centers on sustainable social change. Maxwell Communication Networks has provided cross-border communications and market research for venture capitalists and technology companies such as British Airways, Avis Rent-A-Car, Diners Club, and Hilton Hotels, and was once recognized as the tech pioneer by the World Economic Forum. Now I know what you're thinking, okay? I know what you're thinking. Why are you telling me all this crap? Let's talk about the spies. Was Robert Maxwell a spy? He was, after all, given an Israeli hero's burial. Okay, calm down. Calm down, let's talk about it. I mean, after all, it's hard to not include all the 3-letter agencies, including the KGB and Israel's intel, when talking about mind control. Is it not? I mean, we've already talked about the CIA. Let's go. But Robert Maxwell, honestly, he may have been involved with all of the 3-letter agencies. I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. And they sure is not going to tell me, or us for that matter. But here's what we do know. Whistleblowers allege that Robert Maxwell operated financial networks and money laundering operations that facilitated illicit arms sales and the transfer of weapons to Iran. And he did this through Israel in exchange for Western hostages. Now um, we talked about Iran Contra and everything leading up to that, and my government would not do that. So this is kind of a natural flow from that. So during the 1990s, allegations from a former intelligence officer alleged that Robert Maxwell had assisted in covert negotiations with George Bush Sr., the United States Vice President at the time, with his knowledge. Yeah. So that was in regards to the October surprise and the hostage negotiation. The story goes that he used his publishing empire to negotiate and finance the sale of 4,000 anti tank missiles to Iran in 1987. Robert Maxwell was accused of participating in the distribution of Inslaw's Promise as a part of the U.S. Israeli network. Also, events that we've discussed in previous episodes and articles, like it all keeps coming back around, right? It all comes back around. Everything's connected. The fall of the USSR began with Ronald Reagan shouting, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall," at the Berlin Wall's Brandenburg Gate on June 12th, 1987. I actually remember this. I wasn't terribly old, but I was old enough to watch the news, and I remember him saying that. Anyway, as the Soviet Union began to crumble in 1989, Robert Maxwell formed a $34 million joint venture with the Soviet Academy of Science to publish non-classified scientific and medical reports. It's where he started his empire. The same year, Robert Maxwell made the acquaintance of Donald Trump aboard the Lady Ghislaine. The Lady Ghislaine was Maxwell's 170-foot luxury super yacht, which would later be renamed to the Dancing Hare. And it's not to be confused, though, with the catamaran named the Lady G that is mentioned in the DOJ Epstein library. That they're not, there actually is a catamaran named the Lady G. They're not talking about the super yacht, Lady Ghislaine, which was later renamed. Anyway, so that's just a fun little, I don't know, it's fun. It's a side note. Anyway, point of fact, the Maxwell family has had ties with every sitting U.S. president since Ronald Reagan, including President Obama through his White House counsel, Catherine Rumler, who was a friend and confidant of both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, whom we discussed in the Art Connection episode. So it wasn't a direct connection, but the connection's there. In 1990, Robert Maxwell attempted to persuade the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to support a $20 billion line of credit for the Soviet Union. Now, Thatcher was like, "Nah, dude, bro, no. We ain't going to do that." This is following the Cold War, the Afghan War, and there were chronic sanctions on the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union was in dire straits, and without that line of credit, it officially dissolved. In 1991, a secret KGB document would surface detailing and instructing the intelligence operatives to protect Robert Maxwell's reputation and interests within the Soviet Union. Maxwell Communications Corporation, formerly known as the British media conglomerate, collapsed under billions of dollars of debt and fraud allegations following Robert Maxwell's November 5th, 1991 death when he suffered a heart attack and fell overboard the Lady Ghislaine. 1 month before the official dissolution of the USSR on December 25th, 1991. The traditional American values POTUS George W. Bush Sr., who had taken the highest office of the land in 1989, publicly stated that Robert Maxwell's death was a disaster of loss. George Bush Sr.'s son, That's fun to say. Say that 5 times fast. George Bush Sr.'s son, HW, we'll call him. His son, George W. Bush, who we will call W, would take office in 2001. And W's administration's ethics lawyer, Richard Painter, had been openly critical of the business practices of the Kushner family. W's administration federally prosecuted Charles Kushner, who we're going to call Charles, which led to his guilty plea and imprisonment for tax evasion and witness tampering. Okay, you guys, seriously. Speaking of gang stuff, like we talked about in Jeffrey Epstein's ring of organized crime. So this story goes that Charles Kushner faced 18 counts of tax evasion, illegal campaign contributions, right? So I guess his sister was allegedly involved with the charges that were filed against Charles. So, like sibling rivalry at its finest, we've all done this. Charles hired a sex worker to seduce his sister's husband and record the interaction to like break them up in retribution for what she had told the feds or the IRS or whoever she ratted him out to, right? So Charles ended up being disbarred and served approximately 1 year for his crimes. In 2020, Charles Kushner would receive a full presidential pardon from POTUS Donald Trump. But tell me that's not like an episode of the frickin' Sopranos. Tell me I'm wrong. Jeez, goodness. This stuff does not happen in real life. I refuse to believe it. So the Kushner family empire started in real estate. If you want a really good deep dive into the real estate area and 666 Fifth Avenue, check out my Follow the Money and Who Are These People under the Follow Money playlist. Or Becca Day has a really great deep dive as well on her channel into the Kushners' foundings and their real estate. Um, so because these people are just so honest and above board, Charles would pay $2.5 million to Harvard for his son Jared Kushner's entry. It always comes back to Harvard, doesn't it? Like, Harvard is the school of choice for those who exist in the predatory class and wander the halls of power. At this point, you can't convince me otherwise. They love Harvard. It's where they want to go. Jared Kushner. Okay, I have a typo on my screen. It says Jared. Jarfed. Jared Kushner was the PM, the Prime Minister of Israel. You know that guy. Yeah, that's his godson. Anyway, Jared was a busy, busy dude while his father was jailed. Between schools, internships, and running his father's empire, he also acquired the New York Observer. Lots of employees jumped ship after that, and or were let go because it was rumored that Jared Kushner wanted to use the publication to control the narrative surrounding his family's name. In 2016, the New York Observer endorsed Donald Trump's first run for president. In this era, Jared Kushner would meet Donald Trump's most prized possession. Yeah, his daughter, Ivanka, whom he would end up marrying. Jared Kushner has held several positions of power in the White House, actually, some of which has led to investigations into his conduct. Jared Kushner has been accused of taking the lead in a shadow government, stemming from a 2016 secret meeting he and Michael Flynn, a retired Army lieutenant general and Donald Trump's security advisor, at least for 22 days, they had talked with a Russian ambassador at Trump Tower. This is a behavior that Jared Kushner would repeat. Donald Trump's Secretary of State in 2017-2018, Rex Tillerson, who we're going to call Tillerson, alleged that Jared Kushner at the time, a senior advisor to Donald Trump, um, Rex Tillerson has accused him of secretly conducting foreign U.S. policies without Tillerson's knowledge or consent. After catching Jared Kushner and Stephen Bannon, a podcaster and conspiracy theorist, bestie of Jeffrey Epstein, and he turned to He became Donald Trump's chief White House strategist somehow. Anyway, those two, they were having dinner with the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, where they discussed plans to launch an economic blockade against Qatar. A few weeks later, that blockade would be launched. So Tillerson was like, bro, dude, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't even know about it. The what? What? It's my job. Bro, it's my job. In 2026, Jared Kushner served as an informant. I'm sorry, excuse me. I mean an informal. He served as an informal, unpaid senior advisor to Donald Trump, focusing on diplomacy and international negotiations, such as brokering a fictional ceasefire in Gaza, as well as negotiations regarding the Russian-Ukraine war. Affinity Partners, a Kushner company, faces oversight from the U.S. Finance Committee due to a conflict of interest concerns. Now, the young family, Jared and his pretty little wife, and their children, but mostly him and his wife, they're pursuing the development of a luxury resort in Albania. All this while Jared serves as a U.S. Special Envoy for Peace. Now, Jared Kushner, he's made billions from wealth funds in the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, which violates the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Literally, Albanian residents took to the streets in mass, in protest, in a revolt. Like, seriously, guys, you should look up the footage. This revolt was dubbed the Flamingo Revolution because the wetlands are sensitive habitats for protected wildlife. That the development, which by the way is an island, which around it is basically a landmine. It's just filled with war relics that have never been recovered. Anyway, the wetlands are threatened by this development. Furthermore, Albania has flagged $127 million in transfers of wealth in connection to the project, prompting asset freezes. So the Kushner family owns, holds controlling or vested interest, or has invested in, including but not limited to, all of that. Look. So they withdrew for a bid. They had a bid in for Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery, but they withdrew for it because they thought the rates of return after this hostile takeover might be less than expected. So that went to another family that we're going to get into in a minute. But all of this puts the Kushner family in our number one position of 6 family corporate entities that hold power over 90% of the media that Americans consume in 2026. We're only going over 4 of them today, but 6. 6 families or corporate entities control, have financial control over 90% of the media that Americans consume on a daily basis. Mainstream media, social media, AI, magazines, newspapers, even at the local level. We're going to get into it. But congratulations, Kushners, for taking that number one spot. Yay, you won. Can we play a different game now? Because state run media is high key boring. Speaking of boring, I mean, seriously, speaking of boring, does anybody even post on TikTok anymore? Like after the sell, I can't even like scroll there, much less post because it's just so dull. It's filled with AI slop and ads, and I never see anything from the creators that I actually follow. Why would I want to see their content? I only click the follow button. Ugh. A super, super long document, and I'm debating on whether or not I should keep going and make this like a crazy long video, like an hour, or if I should break it into two parts. But my phone is overheating, so I'm gonna decide and I will let you know. But if I come back in a different outfit or from a different angle, you know why. Did you guys hear about how AI companies are buying up old books and destroying them? Like I can't even lie. It's breaking my heart a little, like a lot, a little. Not only does it kind of feel emotionally like modern day book burning, but I don't know. It just kind of makes me think of like all that information. I know it's not the same thing. I know this information isn't lost like in the fire of the Library of Alexandria, but it just I don't know. It gives that feeling like oh they're old. They're old books. They have a story and a history of themselves, and they're just ripping out the pages of those little spines. And anyway, I'm back. My phone's cooled down, so let's pick up where we left off, shall we? In 2020, 2021, the world was in lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic. We were all stuck in the house bored. Many of us turned to social media as a form of entertainment. During this time, an app that had been designed to make music videos in a minimal amount of seconds, named TikTok, formerly Musically, began to take off as a result with dance trends and shopping hauls. And the TikTok algorithm was, by design, made for a specific user in mind to kind of help people find and form communities of similar fucking talk, I swear, the same interests. You know what I'm saying? And like many other popular apps at the time whose algorithms were made to maintain in real life connections, um, TikTok connected us with the outside world. And we ate it up because it offered us that parasocial connection during a time when in real life connections were becoming or felt obsolete. TikTok offered something else other popular social media apps did not. It was a Chinese company. It had been by design made with children's safety in mind because it was originally made for children to make dance videos. So, I mean, with that, with its terms of service, was a little stricter than others. But it also meant that exposure, discoverability was easier for the user as well. Now, after the Russian interference, um, people of a certain age had started to turn away from apps like Meta. Um, Elon Musk had bought out Twitter, renaming it X. I mean, that kind of came a little later, but that also kind of began to feel like a toxic space, rivaling like Tumblr or Reddit. In my opinion, they're kind of the wild, wild west of feral spaces on mainstream social media. I was never a big user of like the Chans or anything. Like even Reddit just felt a little too feral for me, and I would always, when I would go down these kind of rabbit holes or into these spaces, I would always kind of find myself being like, I'm gonna search up cat video, take myself back to the surface. You know what I'm saying? But here's the thing: on all platforms, in the time after this, after TikTok really exploded after 2020, and all the old people like me started kind of flooding the app. Um, all the platforms, geopolitics and politics really started trending and taking off. Um, and that's great. I love to see it. Let's talk. Um, let's get the word out. Let's get the word out to vote. Let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about what's going on in the world stage. But here's the thing: on TikTok, the US government didn't have any control over the narrative, right? They couldn't they couldn't hide what was going on in Sudan or the Congo or anywhere around the world, really. Um, and we knew, and we were talking about it, and there were some things that we were getting pretty pissed off about, like what was going on in Gaza. So the US government kind of followed the playbook of the venture capitalists and began what could only be described as a government hostile takeover. Yes, those are my words. Come for me, I don't care. Uh, okay, so first, it was by way of the spread of propaganda that the Chinese had access to our data, and it was a national security issue. We can't let the Chinese have access to our data. No, my Chinese spy was really nice and always watched my videos all the way through. Um, so they then passed the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act and the Protecting Americans Data from Foreign Adversaries Act. They were both signed into law on April 24th, 2024, under the Biden administration, leading to the November elections, which, of course, Kamala lost. The acts, in short, said basically that the applications available for American consumption, they had to be by and large owned and run by Americans. And the general public dubbed this the TikTok ban. In other words, the US forced the sale of a foreign app to the United States, not in entirety, just the part that Americans had access to. So in January 2026, under Donald Trump's second term, a company called Oracle finalized the deal that spun off a joint venture giving Oracle a 15% stake in ByteDance. That's TikTok's mother company. Oracle's owner, Larry Ellison, the former CEO of Safra Cat, has had a decades-long relationship with Israel. Oracle supplies the database and border control software to the Israeli Air Force with tech and cloud services through defense contracts. Larry Ellison and son David attended Donald Trump's second inauguration on January 20th, 2025. The next day, Larry Ellison appeared alongside then POTUS Donald Trump at the White House to unveil the Stargate project, which is a $500 billion AI data center initiative anchored by Oracle. And I just want to say, for the record, FAI. So in the year and a half that has followed, it's been a year and a half, that's it. In the year and a half that has followed, users have complained that their content is being suppressed, demonetized, and even face account bans, with emphasis on creators who speak on certain subjects, including geopolitics. As workarounds to the new algorithm, users began to speak in code in attempts to not get caught by the AI keywords, using lingo like blue and white state for Israel, music festivals to describe protests. That mentions of things like Palestine, Congo, and Sudan have all but ceased. Even Jeffrey Epstein content really doesn't get me much reach over there anymore. Ellison is the sixth richest person in America. He owns 98% of the land on Launa, Hawaii, and gave $45 million to Donald Trump's campaign. On July 20th, 2026, Katie Fang reported that a proposed merger between Warner Brothers and Paramount had been suspended for 14 days. The judge in the case stated that the merger would violate antitrust laws. The merger would take 27% of market share, lessening competition, causing irreparable harm. Now, Larry Ellison controls $41.6 billion in investments in Oracle's and 1.4% ownership of Elon Musk's Tesla. With a 77% stake in Paramount Skydance, who his son David manages. The Ellison's investments include, but are not limited to, Warner Brothers, Disney, CNN, HBO, CBS, MTV, Nickelodeon, TNT, TBS, Cartoon Network, Comedy Central, Miramax. You get the point. But like we've previously discussed, the importance of boycotting channels like Nickelodeon and filmmakers like Miramax because of who their founders are and how closely tied their production and production assistants are, and the harm and damage that they've done to women and children and young men as well. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, we go over that in my Silent Screams article. It is a Substack exclusive if you want to check it out over there. Anyway, Larry Ellison's daughter owns Annapurna Pictures, so move over, Murdochs. The Ellisons have arrived. I know. Y'all are like, but Gigi, what about Fox News? I was saving them for last, okay? I was saving them for last, but I won't leave you in suspense any longer. We're not going through all six of the companies and entities that control our media. We're only going through four, but the Murdochs is on the list, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the Murdoch Empire. Rupert Murdoch inherited a newspaper from good old dad. The News was an afternoon tabloid out of South Australia. He was 21 years old, and he took control of it in 1952. He revamped it with focus on sex, crime, and sport. All the things that catch our attention. In 1964, he founded the Australian and so on, building one of the most powerful media empires in American history to the tune of $22 billion. But not without more than its fair share of controversy. The family was so filled with drama that the HBO drama series Succession used them as a muse. They've also had many harassment and sexual assault allegations, some of which inspired the 2019 film Bombshell. Fox News has faced legal issues for broadcasting false information. In 2023, Fox News paid out $787.5 million after the Dominican voting systems proved that Fox News host had deliberately amplified false conspiracy theories regarding the 2020 U.S. election, stating the host knew the claims were mind-blowingly nuts. Their defense was their programs should be viewed as opinion, commentary, and entertainment rather than factual news. And they backed up that statement, arguing a reasonable viewer would understand that certain shows are not broadcasting straight, objective facts. Yeah, and smart people don't like me, said Donald Trump. So Fox News had been instrumental to Donald Trump's political career. In 2020, when Rupert Murdoch he acted appalled by Donald Trump's denial of the 2020 election, saying that it was a threat to our democracy. Yeah. In 2025, despite all of that, the two men, Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch, yeah, they broke bread in early 2026. Not personal. Business. So the Murdoch family has interest, investments, and ownership in, including but not limited to, News Corp, formerly the 21st Century Fox, Fox Corp, The Sun, The Times of London, HarperCollins, TMZ. By the way, well, where the hell is Nancy Guthrie? And why did they contact TMZ? I need to know this. Anyway, Fox also engaged with joint ventures with Sony, who controls about 9 to 11% of the media that Americans consume on a daily basis. So Fox engaged in a joint venture with Sony that include 3000 Pictures, TriStar Productions, and Home Video Alliances. They also dominate the Australian media with over 60% of the metro and national daily newspaper distribution. Now, I'm not a Fox connoisseur. I'm not. Nor do I consume Breitbart News. This was news to me. I thought that Rupert Murdoch and Steve Bannon would be like, I don't know, besties, because I mean, they have plenty in common, right? Like, given their proclivities to rage bait, their mutual proximity to the truth, and shared devotion to Donald Trump's first run for president of the United States, But I was wrong. They are not besties. No, they do not like each other at all. In 2017, Rupert Murdoch urged Donald Trump to fire Stephen Bannon as the White House chief strategist because of the whole Rex Tillerson thing. No, like literally no. It was the Mercer family's desire to trump Murdoch and his empire, right? That led them to financially back Stephen Bannon, who claimed, despite Rupert Murdoch's and Fox News' part in the rise of MAGA, that Rupert Murdoch was trying to sabotage Donald Trump's campaign. Eek. I mean, Stephen Bannon was fired, by the way. The eek. There's a rift in the right, am I right? Not that the left doesn't have it. Like, the left, we definitely have our fair share of rifts and things we disagree upon and stuff like that. Like, I'm sure a lot of Democrats hate me, but that's fine. So, listen. Stephen Bannon sat on the board of Cambridge Analytica, where his role came under fire for the 2018 Facebook data scandal that was used to build voter profiles. At Breitbart, Stephen Bannon's leadership transformed the website into a media force for the American populist movement. In 2016, Stephen Bannon, whom we literally discuss in every single article, like seriously, I'm over here talking about Jeffrey Epstein and following the money and trying to figure out his world and the people in his world and the culture in which they live. And Stephen Bannon is always there. Always. His ugly, sorry, his toad-like appearance is always in my face. Anyway, so the platform, the alt-right platform that he promoted and was a part of was called Parler. And he would encourage, Stephen Bannon would encourage his followers to join the conservative social media network to avoid censorship that was found on mainstream media platforms. All three of those are controlled by the Mercer family. The Mercer family is led by a computer scientist for IBM and a hedge fund manager, Robert Mercer, who is one of the most prominent financial backers of the conservative movement, with donations of up to $100 million to right-wing initiatives and candidates. They were instrumental in Donald Trump's 2016 run. They also backed Ted Cruz and Turning Point USA, but we also previously discussed. His daughter Rebecca served on Donald Trump's transition team and sits on the board of Brexit Foundation. And while they had no role in Donald Trump's administration, the Newhouse family, owners of Advanced Publication and Condé Nast, N-A-S-T, I don't know why I want to pronounce it Nest. I feel like I've heard it that way. I'm probably wrong. Anyway, remember I learned from reading. We are a reading channel here, hence why I'm reading this article that I wrote to you. Because I like to read, and I like to write, and I like to read about what I wrote. Okay, sorry. I'm so cringe, and I love it. I wouldn't change for a fucking thing. Okay, so I'll have to cut out all the swear words. So the Newhouse family, they've had long-standing ties with Donald Trump as well. It was Cy Newhouse, friends with Roy Cohn, who served as Donald Trump's personal advisor. He's the one that convinced Donald Trump to write The Art of the Deal for Random House when they owned and managed Random House. And a little backstory there. I think Rosie O'Donnell can tell you all about it. A lot of New Yorkers really hated Donald Trump and his empire, his real estate goings on. And Donald Trump needed to spin that. He needed to get people on his side. So Cy Newhouse was like, write a book. Let's spin it and make people love you. So the book helped create the myth that Donald Trump was self-made and smart and all the things that lend credence to his cult of personality. The Newhouse family holds interest in investments in including ownership, but not limited to. Here's some of them: Vanity Fair, Vogue, GQ, The New Yorker, Wired, Advanced Publications, Condé Nast, Reddit, Warner, Discovery, Time Inc., Time Warner, Charter Communications, Spectrum, Cox, Telecom, AT&T, Media One, Liberty Media, American Express, MTV, Bright House, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, we've got Glamour, we've got Architecture Digest, we have a ton of city and local newspapers. These people, like, if you reading it, there's a chance the Newhouse family has published it. In 2026, when Jared bought the New York Observer, he began to attend galas alongside Newhouse and Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. Under the desk news, she, Vi, or V, I think it's Vi, isn't it? Sorry if I got your name wrong. You're never going to see this anyway, but love you, girl. So they reported, by the way, they're a content creator and a podcaster. They had reported under the Heritage Foundation's Author Project 2025, under their blueprint titled Project Esther, which that okay, what they reported basically was that right-wing influencers are being paid up to $7,000 per post, using the power of influence to talk about anti-Palestine and pro-Israel propaganda, and all of that is listed in the blueprint Project Esther. In May of 2014, chronically online in incel spaces, Elliot Rogers targeted a sorority house, killing 6 and leaving 14 more injured. The act was recorded and accompanied by a manifesto. It was uploaded and it actually received praise from his parasocial community for the crimes against young blonde women. And we've witnessed since then, and even before then, but we've witnessed in my lifetime a rise in school shooting, and that was a term that did not exist when I was in school. So through radicalization of our youth online, on September 10th, 2025, a 16-year-old male shot 2 in his school before taking himself. And while the story failed to trend on social media, it was reported that he was radicalized online. Bailey Sarian's Dark History podcast about diet culture. She chronicles the history of advertising that influenced women to take up smoking as early as the 1920s. And guess what? Their tobacco sales soared as a result. The podcast includes how ad campaigns held influence over diet culture that led to an epidemic of eating disorders lasting through the heroin chic era of fashion in the 1990s. And that era of fashion promoted pedophilic and unhealthy, unachievable beauty standards. We're now witnessing in real time, after half a lifetime, old people like me fighting against it and millennials fighting against it. We're really seeing a resurgence of those standards today as a result of advertisers pushing a new drug made for diabetes called Ozempic. Now, I've talked about my remembrance of Satanic Panic because I was a child who occupied the alternative spaces in the 1980s. I talk about that actually on my Juju Says What Now series on YouTube, but it was like from 3 years ago. But the nationwide panic was a result of influence and conspiracy theories that led to ratings on our music for one. It also led to some people ended up going to jail for things that they never did, because the media influenced people, got them all rage baited, and they all believed that daycares were practicing satanic rituals. You guys, I mean, if you need more examples of the power of influence, Just look up Gamergate or Jan 6th. Hell, there are makeup influencers that can literally sell out a mascara in within hours of posting a positive review on it. That's the power of influence. With the power of influence, I argue that the government doesn't really need programs like MKUltra or drugs like LSD. They don't need that stuff to control our minds, our thoughts, our ideologies, our behaviors, our actions. All they need is a feed and an FYP. So, that's all I have for you today. I really, really hope that you join me next time when I launch Philip author Pat Philip Author Thompson's deep dive. It's going to be a multi-part series. To be honest with you, right now I think I have the first 3 episodes researched, but not completely scripted out yet. I won't be posting it on my Substack until I have all of the whole timeline researched and written out. But yeah, like, I hope you check me out. I don't know if I'm going to be clipping this one out and posting it to Facebook because a lot of these sections are just so long and I hate doing 1 part, 2 part. I don't know. Let me know if you want little clips rather than a 2 hour, and I will clip it out for you over on Facebook under my Gigi Says What Now clips playlist. Otherwise, uh, remember, I love you. You are valid. You are worthy. And you are loved. Bye. Oh. I'm not a credible source. Like, I research information from both credible and uncredible sources, and why I try to do my best to bring you accurate information. I am definitely a feelings over facts page here. Obviously, I talk a lot of shit. But I am human and I can and I do make mistakes, but I do try to bring you to the best of my knowledge. If you do want a list of sources for this article, which is actually episode 11 of Follow the Money, um, check out my Substack at Genevieve Grova. They're all listed there for you. Okay, I love you for real this time. Bye.